समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Donald Trump has landed in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for a week-long visit to Asia, beginning with the ASEAN summit. He will subsequently travel to Japan and to South Korea, where he will eventually meet Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this visit is not merely ceremonial. It comes at a time when global geopolitics is far more fragmented than ever. American priorities have shifted, and Trump himself, in a second term, is very different from the disruptive and yet outward looking leader of 2017. Now, to understand the significance of this trip, it is interesting to compare it to Trump's first Asia tour in November 2017, when he visited 5 countries: Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And this trip lasted over 13 days. Then the Indo Pacific was the centerpiece of US foreign policy, and the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad, was revived as its strategic core. By comparison, today, the Quad is no longer the centerpiece of Trump's Indo Pacific vision. Instead, we see a fragmented strategy driven by transactional deals, selective engagement, and a push for US allies to shoulder more security and economic responsibility. So let's understand the Trump 1.0, that Indo Pacific vision and the rise of the Quad. Trump's first term marked a major conceptual shift in US strategy towards Asia. Key milestones were, for instance, this shift from Asia Pacific to Indo Pacific. Now, Trump's administration formally adopted the term Indo Pacific, expanding the strategic theater from the Western Pacific to include the Indian Ocean region. In 2018, for instance, the US Pacific Command, the US PACOM, was renamed the US Indo Pacific Command, or the US Indo PACOM, institutionalizing this shift. Second, it was about the revival of the Quad. In November 2017, during Trump's Asia tour, foreign ministers of the US, India, Japan, Australia met to revive the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Of course, they started to plan so many things around it. The Quad emerged as a platform to promote a free and open Indo-Pacific, check China's maritime assertiveness, and enhance cooperation in areas like maritime security, infrastructure, technology, resilience of supply chains, etc. Then there was more regional focus on security. Trump's first trip focused heavily on North Korea's nuclear threat. At Yokota Air Base in Japan, Trump had emphasized the US-Japan military strength and sent a clear warning to Pyongyang. He had urged regional actors, especially China, to enforce harsher sanctions on North Korea, etc. Back then, his rhetoric was strong. He used to frequently use, phrases like rocket man and fire and fury, and maximum pressure kind of defined US policy. Then, even when it came to engagement with China in 2017, despite tensions, Trump had sought a working relationship with Xi Jinping. Now, trade war discussions were in infancy. Tariffs had escalated only in 2018. So Trump expected China to help restrain North Korea in return for economic concessions. Now, overall, the thing is that Trump 1.0 was loud, confident, and outwardly committed to countering China by building coalitions, mainly through the Indo-Pacific framework and the Quad. Now, Trump 2.0, where the world has changed and so has Mr. Trump. Now, fast forward to 2025, Trump returns to Asia in a completely different geopolitical environment and with a completely different aspiration. But first, understand what is going on. What is the multipolar disorder here? Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Hamas-Israel conflict, China's slowdown, and yet its dominance on rare earths and a tech-driven trade war have scattered global strategic focus. Now, the United States right now, it's stretched across three major theaters. Of course, Europe, Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific, and is also getting more and more preoccupied in the Western Hemisphere, its own backyard, against Venezuelan drug cartels and Maduro's regime. Trump 2.0 has also shown unprecedented involvement in the Middle Eastern theater, as well as the Latin American theater, compared to the Indo-Pacific. Now, America First has become more hardened and more transactional. So, Trump's second term is far more inward looking, even less ideological, and even more unapologetically transactional. The message to allies is quite blunt: pay for your own security, buy American weapons, invest in America, and prove your loyalty. Unlike 2017, when Washington still played the role of a systemic stabilizer, the Trump 2.0 is a disruptor of alliances if they don't serve immediate US interests, and more than that, if they don't serve the rhetoric of the MAGA base back home. And what has happened is that Quad has lost that centrality. Now, while not dissolved, the Quad is no longer the centerpiece of US Indo-Pacific policy, owing to Trump-Modi tensions and other factors I just told you about. Plus, there are also smaller interest-specific coalitions that are suffering. For example, the US-Japan-South Korea trilateral. Now, this is certainly not going well, as Trump has changed his rhetoric on Kim Jong-un, and I'm going to come back to it. But then there's also the AUKUS, which is between US, UK, and Australia. Then there is a SQUAD, which is the US, Japan, Australia, Philippines, a group considered more hawkish on China. But having said that, strategic experts from all these countries express lack of confidence in Trump's commitment to their security concerns. And here, let me just tell the role of how the repivot to Middle East and the Western Hemisphere kind of cuts into America's interest in the Indo-Pacific. You know, Trump has doubled down on Israel. He has supported deployment of B-2 bombers, floated new peace plans, and has directly threatened Iran. In the Western Hemisphere, Trump has ordered, the Carrier Strike Group to the Caribbean to tackle drug cartels and pressure Venezuela. And this deployment has been going on for more than a month, and it has a lot of capabilities now deployed there. Now, naturally, these actions have come at the expense of steady Indo-Pacific engagement. But once more, let's come back to 2025 and discuss why Trump's Asia visit matters, even when it is a radically different environment from Trump 1.0. You know, the first thing is the rare earth deal with China. The top agenda item is negotiating a rare earth mineral deal with China. Because despite tariffs, anti-coupling rhetoric, both economies remain interlinked. The US relies on China for over 60% of its rare earth processing, and China relies on US for advanced chips. Trump wants access to rare earths in China to buy more soy, as well as open more access to the US exporters. And China would want to exchange those for easing tariffs or reducing military pressure or commitment to Taiwan. Now, a deal with China is key for Trump and his most important objective during this trip. But that's not all. Why? Because there are certain low-hanging fruits. For example, Trump will showcase diplomatic wins, such as, of course, he's mediated the Thailand-Cambodia deal. And then he looks confident to secure Japanese and Korean investments in US manufacturing and semiconductors. He would also extract public defense commitments from allies without promising equal reciprocity. And here, let me just tell you a little bit about what is going on in other allies. So Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi, aligned with the late Shinzo Abe's legacy, has agreed already to increase defense spending to over 2% of GDP and is likely to agree to more investments in the US too. South Korea, under pressure, is expected to contribute more to hosting US troops and deployments in exchange of keeping the pressure on North Korea up. ASEAN countries, in fact, now, these have been frustrated with tariffs, and these are often caught in the crossfire between US and China, but they also depend on both because of key dependencies on both these superpowers. And despite Trump's pulls and pressures, exports from ASEAN to the US have nearly doubled since 2017 when Trump first visited them. Therefore, they would also do everything to make sure Trump is on their side. And ASEAN actually is caught between tariffs and supply chains. It is deeply entangled in US and Chinese economic networks. Now, here I can give you an example. Malaysia exported about $10 billion dollars of semiconductors to the US last year. Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, all these countries have benefited from supply chains relocations during the US China trade war. And yet they face tariff uncertainty and pressure to choose sides. And that is what they will be doing. They will be trying to keep Trump happy. Then there is the trilateral dynamic of the Indo-Pacific, which is going to be under more strain under Trump. For example, the US, Japan, South Korea. Now, this trilateral security mechanism dates back to the Clinton era, but Trump disrupted it completely in 2018 by opening direct talks with Kim Jong-un. And in Trump 2.0, the trilateral is even more uncertain. In fact, Japan and South Korea both fear that Trump may abandon security commitments and focus only on trade. And what makes them both more nervous is Trump's stand on North Korea, which I've just told you about, which shows the possibility of a grand bargain, because Trump has repeatedly expressed his desire to meet Kim Jong-un. And this time, the goal is not merely meeting or, putting pressure, but perhaps a potential deal. And this could basically result in freezing or reducing nuclear testing from their side in exchange for sanction relief and recognition from the US side. But remember that this would fundamentally alter the Korean Peninsula's security architecture and balance of power. So to sum up, the US and China are adversaries and essential partners as of now, and both these parties know the limits of confrontation. Current US tariffs on China are economically painful and hard to sustain. American companies need access to Chinese markets. China needs US technology and agricultural imports, etc. Xi and Trump understand each other's vulnerabilities and strengths from previous negotiations as well. And finally, how does all this look when we are looking at it from New Delhi? Now, from India's view, which is marred by strategic fatigue and uncertainty, Trump 2.0 is not just hostile, but largely indifferent and has been undermining India's strategic posture. India-US trade talks have been stalled. The US has sanctioned Russian oil imports to India despite India's balancing, and Trump has engaged Pakistan diplomatically, which has really unsettled New Delhi. Now, Quad has not been completely dismantled, that's right, but nothing new has been added either. So Trump's second Asia visit reflects his desire to be seen as a peacemaker, deal maker, strategic balancer, also that he can make the US more inward looking. So Trump 2.0 is about leveraging US preeminence in the world for selective gains, rare earths, investment pledges, and diplomatic credit. But he's going to pluck the low-hanging fruits, he's going to push the allies to do more, and he's going to keep his options open in China and North Korea. The Indo-Pacific is no longer America's singular strategic priority, and the Quad, once the centerpiece, is now just one tool among many. But the region and many in the region are watching closely. The outcomes of this visit will reveal whether Washington still has a coherent Asia strategy or only a set of negotiable deals. And I'll be back to discuss that and more. Stay tuned.